And we are in Fogageddon here in British Columbia, day 4 of non-stop fog. And this fog will actually come in your home. Now, fog is normally a reflection of light on moisture, right? And so I grow up on the East Coast. I'm used to 120 days a year of fog. Check the Guinness Book of World Records. You don't believe me? But I grew up in the day when there was no radars, no sounders, and you had to get on the bow of the boat. You know, you had to you took an alarm clock and a chart, and you headed out into the ocean, and you took for whatever your alarm clock said, and then you took another course. I'm just talking while waiting to make sure everything's going to be good here, folks. Looks like a bad quality. Hang on. I grow up on the East Coast. I'm used to well, the audio's okay, so that's all we can do. Mama Knox left a comment on my other video that I got to remember to say. And this one here is part 1 of it. And I don't want to say it now because it's going to give a bit of the game away that I'm up to. So it looks like I'm all synced up. We'll just go ahead because we got a lot to cover. And I got 3 thumbs down already. Pretty darn good. You know I'm going to be giving them the gears tonight. Oh, this is going to be badass. Now the big problem was, how is that audio going to come across for you folks? And so after the first clip, we'll find out. And hopefully I got the audio worked out. That is not fog. Yeah, it looks like fog. It's not fog that we're getting here. Let me come back and touch on that for everybody. These particles, there's, I don't know how many thousands per cubic meter there's going to be, but it's like incredible. It doesn't leave moisture on windshields or on the mirrors or on metal like you would expect, from condensation, different temperatures. And quite a few people now have commented how the fog doesn't, well, it looks like fog. It doesn't leave no moisture, but it's all day and all night. And fog is which is what we're talking about for radiation, is where the chemtrail the skies with so many particulates, the radiation can't rise up. It gets captured by the particles because they're electronically charged, the radiation, and that weighs them back down. And so this is a mitigation for every country on the planet. Audio's good. That's all that matters. And so let's get busy. Audio's great. Thanks, Sydney's. Standing Foot, Annabeth, Tracy May, Basic Data, Janet, Pam, Candace, James, Big Now TV, Wedge Man. Haha, I got quite a few into that time. Not too shabby. And Lori, hi. Lori puts up lots of videos, folks. She's out there searching all the time. JD Mason, Annie Beck, McGaltree. Can be fixed by wiping off the lens. Yeah. Well, that could have happened because I was back and forth to shop. So hang on a second. Let me see. Well, I won't know for a few minutes because my videos are like a minute behind. So the feed that's coming back to me, because I normally don't run another feed there, so I'm going to have to get off it. But if I made it worse, I guess you guys will tell me quick enough. I'm just going to move down, and we just went from 70 to 108. Well, don't blink, Dana. Audio's great. That's all that matters. As long as I don't touch anything else, we'll be okay for the rest of the night. Okay, so the first clip I'm going to play for you. Boom, 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 boom. And this is a video, of course, the title says it all. And just hang on, I'm going to move this over. Not very often I do stuff like that. So Ken Buesseler, and I can't pronounce his name properly, and Jay Cullen are the real scientists, or the like wacko nuclear madman lobbyists. And they're lobbyists. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. There's a link below to the offending video where they basically lie on their back with diapers on, with their arms and legs up in the air and screaming, "Nuclear is not bad! It's not bad! Stop and asking!" It's really pathetic. And was it evil fog? Did it get cleaned off? You have fog again tonight if you open your door, it comes in. Yeah, it's crazy. This is 4 days of fog. It actually is better. Fixed video with wiper. You gotta get a wiper on my video. Dana's fuzzy wuzzy. Okay, everybody's saying it's a bit better. I screwed up. That's typical. Okay, let me see what the audio comes across like for the first clip. And the first clip is... I can't remember. It'll show up when I start playing it.
But the debris associated with the tsunami affected the entire coast of Japan. And so a lot of the debris that's washing out and arriving here is likely hasn't been into contact with radioactive material.
Oh! So we'll just check and see if that's too loud. I know what I just done that time was probably too loud. But see if the audio of this was too loud and why. You certainly heard it for sure. I'll adjust it if it helps everybody. Was what he just said was that the debris that was coming out wasn't contaminated. But I guess he doesn't think about how the plumes went out for hundreds of miles before they even started. You know, how the plumes made it all the way to the west coast of Japan, 1,200 miles away. And the prevailing winds are from the west, and these were hot particles. And so it's easy to assume that tsunami debris, it wasn't like flying away from Japan. It was taking its time moving with currents. I got 14 years as a commercial diver, over 300 days a year. I know a few things too. And so I was easily able to postulate correctly, of course, because the plumes came out and landed all over that U.S. Ronald Reagan. We'll get to that later. And they went all the way out there and got on that debris. Hot particles. That the tsunami encompassed that entire site. And there's a video down below that I put together for everybody. If everybody's not really familiar with Fukushima. And it's reactors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And also the ocean, and also the aerosol. And I covered all of them in about a 22-minute package as an introduction with the original pictures. And you can download them yourself below the video. And there's around 2,136 of those pictures below. You can go download them and look at them yourself and make your own determinations on how much carnage went on at that site. All clear? Okay. So the sound's good all around? Okay, well, I'll keep the volume at that level. Thanks, Mama Knox. Mama Knox put a great comment there. I won't forget it. So let me finish off this clip in that case.
I think that there's quite a groundswell of citizen science where people are looking at debris that washes up and making measurements and trying to compare those to background. Again, that's problematic because we can't necessarily fingerprint that changes in radioactivity are related specifically to radionuclides coming from Fukushima.
Background. And so, yes, you can take that as what it really truly means. See, the debris was coming out, and there was a massive amount of it. And all of it got coated, because it had to come right out there alongside the Fukushima prefecture. All that debris had to come right past Fukushima. All of it went out into the Pacific Brine, which is just off the coastline of Japan, and it whisked everything straight out into a direct line to North America. And so the jet streams are right above that. So the stuff that came out went across, which was an amazing amount because Max fuel blew up in a couple of days. That was 2 million times worse than any other reactor on the planet. Those particulates, the uranium-234, 235, the uranium daughters, the plutonium, 239, 240, there was particulates themselves, big particulates of really hot particles would have landed all over that because the entire nuclear waste site itself, of course, was engulfed in the tsunami, so all the water had to come back through there too. And the pictures that are down below shows you all the damage, not everything, but shows you 2,136 pictures that the Fukushima 50 themselves took. And so let's keep going to the next one. Clear, Tracy, thank you. So I just wanted to go back.
But first, Jay, where are you going for credible information?
Being a scientist, I tend to go to the primary literature. I've found Ken's website and Ken's research group as a very useful source of information. And I've been sharing that with members of the public here in Canada as well.
So he's using Ken now as his source, right? Okay, let's keep going. And once again, in the last video that I made earlier this evening, we know that Jay, and that was Jay that time. I'll start getting on the ball because I got 20 of these clips. But we know that Jay worked for Woods Hole, right? And so he does that repeatedly. But let's go to the next one. This is an interesting one. Here we go.
It says, don't worry about it, but there are very few measurements. The half-moon base statement, I believe, is a response to the recent...
That's Ken Buesseler.
Viral video that showed the increase in count rate, the radioactivity on the beaches, which, as it turns out, is from a natural source.
Right? You get that one? Now, you got to remember, right, that every time it rains, it washes these isotopes back out to the coastline, right? Where's it going to go? Right, all along your coastline. And so now they're going to try to equate 1,400 counts per minute as just radon, normal background radiation that's indigenous to planet Earth. It's got nothing to do with this equation. It's got zero to do with this equation, and that in the basement of your house you'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 counts a minute of that kind of background radiation. But you know that when you set your Geiger counters to look for that kind of stuff, that you're looking for something that's so innocuous that it and once again, it doesn't belong in the equation. So let's keep going there.
A mineral that is high in the natural element thorium that decays and is...
So why are we talking about natural stuff? Because he's trying to equate high counts on the coastline, because the rain washes it, not all of it, but washes, a lot of these isotopes and the radiation and the mutations out into the ocean.
Beaches. So they did make a measurement apparently in response to that recent finding by a citizen scientist that there was higher levels along the beach. If they're a little bit more proactive, maybe that wouldn't have happened. If we already had measurements out there, then that wouldn't necessarily happen by individuals with Geiger counters. So,
with individuals with Geiger counters, if the government was out there taking numbers and posting them, then we wouldn't go out there and look, is what he's suggesting there. And then he's suggesting how ridiculous it is that someone like me or you would go out there with Geiger counters as just laughable. So he's discouraging people into even considering it by going through that routine, right? Let's go to the next one.
I'm hoping we're trying to provide some of that on our website, this Our Radioactive Ocean.
And so that's Ken. He's plugging his website now.
.org website that we set up. Basically, you kind of see two sides of it. There's kind of an alarmist twist. Alarmist!
Right? And see, starting off the conversation by doing that, by saying that people that are concerned are alarmists, puts people off and then makes everybody who don't know any better, oh, you're alarmist. That's your instant reaction because you're supposed to be able to trust people like this from Woods Hole. Neither one of these two told the truth for the entire video, not for 1 second. They manipulated and lied, and that's why we're here tonight. It's so wrong.
Response, because radioactivity can be very dangerous. It causes cancer, and we should be concerned at levels that have been seen on land, say in Japan, and initially after the accident. But then they get down to lower levels, further away you get from the accident, the further 3 years later we get.
Right, that's pretty slick. The further you get away from the accident, 3 years later. So first because of the distance, and then 3 years later throws it in there on top of that. And like you've seen in the video today, where he equates the 137 coming out of Fukushima, when it gets like 1,000 miles off the coastline, turns to potassium-40, right? Which you're allowed 7,000 becquerels in your water because it's normal radiation. If you drink it, you off-gas those 7,000 becquerels up. Insignificant. That has no right to be in this conversation, that everything on this planet. So if you have paint, and you put paint on an object, whatever the becquerels of the paint you're putting on, what the object equalizes. It can only contain so much potassium-40, but that's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with E equal mc squared. So it's extraordinarily deceitful to do that. And so...
We had an accident in 2011.
This is Ken again, right?
Iodine, actually, 131 was one of the primary concerns because of thyroid cancer, it's decayed. It has an 8-day half-life.
It's decayed. It only has an 8-day half-life times 10. But you can't have iodine-131 without iodine-129. And then you had the kelp off California single bed with 40 million becquerels per second every second of iodine-131. And that's 10 million becquerels of iodine-129. So that's never going away. That can't go away. And then we have all the numbers of the iodine all around California, where it was 181 times higher in the rainwater and the drinking water. And then you have Korea, where they closed 130 schools for 10 times less and wouldn't let the kids go out because it was radioactive fallout. You got to think about how Russia evacuated 7,500 communities because they done the right ethical and moral thing. They didn't try to deceive people and let them live there. I mean, Fallujah has so much uranium-238 into it. 80% of the children are born with no eyes, no nose, no mouth. And that's what people like Jay are trying to hide. That's what people like Ken spend a lot of times hiding. Like, neither one of these are nuclear physicists. Both of these, I mean, is there a shortage of nuclear physicists out there? Is that what's going on? Is that why we always got to put up with people like this who have no right to be out there talking about it? People say, Danny, you got no right to be out there talking about it. You know, find the mistakes I'm making. I don't say I can make no mistakes. I'm just saying that out of everything I'm doing, that's only 1/10 of 1% I might make mistakes. These guys are endless the entire video. It's outrageous lies. It's absolute unimaginable manipulation. Hi Zoe, are you okay? So iodine-131, you can't have, reactors don't run on iodine, they run on uranium plutonium. And iodine just doesn't come over here and the uranium plutonium stays over there. Cesium-137 can't exist without 30 times more strontium. 30 times. 30 times. We're talking about massive numbers they talk about for cesium, and then you have to get your calculator because they won't tell you how many numbers that actually is. They won't tell you that each reactor used to have 1 million gallons a minute, and that no matter how much water runs over those hot coriums or pieces of it, or the rods that blew up, the 122,000 rods in each pan, each fuel pool that boils off all the time and releases radioactive radiation into the environment. Those pools are burning off all the time. They boil all the time. They got to add water to that all the time. Where do you think they're putting that? They're releasing that into your environment. All of these isotopes are supposed to be in the sarcophagus till the end of time. That's what the licensing agreement says. And they dump it in the ocean in barrels constantly. And then they roll out people that are not nuclear scientists, but are lobbyists of the worst kind, that are selling everybody out and that are in positions of influence. And so I have huge concerns with someone like Jay at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada, holding on to his job. That's a huge concern for me, because he's manipulating and he's maniacal in his amount of lies. We'll just keep going down the road. Saying iodine-131 only has a half-life of 8 days is the craziest thing you can imagine coming out of somebody who's supposed to have an education, supposed to have some morals and ethics. And let me just keep going here, because that's so disappointing to me. So now we got to run over to, they're skipping gallons for becquerels. This is kind of interesting. I'll close down that Windows. Where's that Windows to? Hello, Windows. There we go. But see...
So, Jay, based on what we know, what would you say to people who are concerned about this? Not only concerned about our health, but concerned about the environment, the ocean, marine life. I mean, when you talk to people
Serious
about
question.
Concern, how do you answer these questions?
Yes, Jay, how do you do that, man? I'm going to play that in a bit. But he's actually trained about phytoplankton. So he understands that if, one isotope, a long-lasting isotope, that he claims can be solutable, I'll get to that, these isotopes are going to last for, like uranium, 4.5 billion years, times 10, 45 billion years. Because they keep going down to another radioactive isotope, another radioactive isotope, and that's what the half-life means. They change to another radioactive isotope. So half-life is the biggest lie out there because it's times 10. It's the biggest manipulating thing out there. That's how they marginalize it right away. And that's... Let me keep going.
Well, I think it is a question of risk and what the level of risk associated with these radionuclides in the marine environment and the health of...
Well, the radionuclides, they will kill 75 million to 100 million of the phytoplankton with just a couple of pulses because they're putting out so much energy, because they went through the chain reaction, right? And because they were atomized and everything else. And that doesn't stop doing that. You can take that isotope, if you could, out of the cup, fill it up again with another 75 million or 100 million phytoplanktons, and drop the isotope back in there, and you can kill them. And take it out and do that all day till you kill almost all of them. But so when you're releasing it so much into the environment where it snows down on the ocean, and as that goes all the way down to the ocean in a big snowstorm, all of it's putting out energy, every bit of it. And so all the phytoplankton and all the other... Now, it's not just 75 to 100 million phytoplankton in that cup. I mean, there's that much there, but there's all these other creatures there too. But they're the very foundation of the planet. They make the oxygen. And they feed. They're the very beginning of the food chain. And so without them, everything else has to fail. But when you radiate everything there and you kill everything there, including the oxygen, there's nothing left behind. That's the plume. That's why the ocean is broken, talking about 3,000 miles with nothing behind it, that they came through for 28 days, where there was no birds. Can you imagine that? All my life on the ocean, no matter where I looked, there was hundreds of birds diving somewhere, feeding on something. It was always like that. It's always been like that. And now all of a sudden you got 3,000 miles. That woke me up in a hurry. And so as I looked down that hole, I realized it's the most frightening thing possible, because all that radiation keep falling out of the sky. Any kind of ocean that could recover in certain spots keeps getting buried. But all this stuff goes down and lands on the ocean floor. And where the cold water brings up the nutrients normally, now it's bringing up radioactive material. Because that radioacts, because everything on the ocean floor becomes radioactive because there's so many snowstorms landing on the ocean. And yeah, some of it gets carried around because of the different salinity of the oceans and the different speeds of the ocean for the different depths, and the way they intermingle and everything else is complicated. But I mean, there's so many peer-reviewed studies out there, it's endless, and they don't mention nothing on the go over to Kansas site and go over to Woods Hole and we'll tell you nothing. And it gets me even more creepier than all of this put together. Let me keep going.
The marine environment, and by extension the health of the public, and trying to put the risk in perspective is difficult, because I think in my experience, and perhaps Ken has found this as well, is that the perception of risk when it comes to radiation in the environment tends to be out of step with what some of the actual risks are. It is important to point out that the situation in Fukushima itself,
you don't say,
and at the reactor sites is very, it's a serious situation, and as Ken pointed out, monitoring what's going on in the North Pacific is one of the very useful tools that we have to try and determine what the impact of the disaster will be. And going forward, if conditions change there, I do point out to the public that monitoring...
If conditions change, you had 3 melted reactors, you never open your mouth. The 3 of them blew up, and all these pools melted down, you never open your mouth, you don't mention it, you don't bring it up once. It released so much material that you keep fending you don't know nothing, but yet you're an expert, but you don't know nothing, yet you're an expert. And when you open your mouth, it's always a lie and a manipulation and deception. And you equate, well, I'm going to keep going here.
It's the best way to determine when the risks
appear
to rise to a level where they should be front and center in people's minds.
You'll tell us, right,
Jay? Life.
You'll get right on that, will you?
Last time we did this show, our guest said that about 800 tons of toxic material were pouring into the Pacific Ocean every day. Do we have an update on that, Jay?
the volume of water that's being delivered to the ocean,
right?
Or in terms of
she
the
said
actual
right.
Amount of radioactivity that
she says right, or the amount of radioactivity that's been released.
The amount of toxic and radioactivity material that's
she tries to confirm it, but she agrees.
Well, at this point, the most recent numbers I have in front of me, and perhaps Ken can provide some insight here too, is that there's been on the order of 80 petabecquerels of cesium-137, for example.
Okay, 80 petabecquerels. Well, that would mean how much of uranium becquerels, and how much of plutonium becquerels, and how much uranium-234 and 235, I should say, of becquerels each. And so what about all their daughters? What about all that strontium that goes with cesium? If there's that much 90 petabecquerels, there has to be 30 times that of strontium-90, which got a hell of a long life. But you can't have any of it without the uranium plutonium. They're not just going to travel separate, so why are you talking about the one thing only? Why do you keep... But you mentioned a few other things. We'll get to that.
Well, that's been released to the environment. A petabecquerel is a very large number.
Right, so it was a bait and switch.
10 to the 15.
She was talking about all the water that's running out onto the reactor, and he jumps over to this one, right? And that was based on releases from the aerosols. Now, he's equating that with what went into the ocean, but that's not what we were talking about originally, and he jumped it. And let's keep going.
Becquerels, which is a measure of how many atoms that are radioactive.
Right, and so the New York Times reported 600 tons a day that was being flushed out into the ocean from underneath, because they're sitting... The site is built up on 100 foot of topsoil. That was brought in, laid there. They put the reactors on top of this. Three of them blew up. Unit 1, Unit 3, and Unit 4 had detonations. Unit 2 had some kind of detonation. Unit 1, 2, and 3 had complete 100% meltdowns. Their Unit 3 was MOX fuel, 2 million times worse than any other reactor on the planet. Chernobyl was a 30% meltdown. It was 1/3 the size of the reactors at Fukushima. We're talking about some serious radiation that got blown all over that site. They came in and plowed everything in. There's a river that runs down the hill. That's washing it all out into the ocean. Where did my single go? Did I get kicked off the line? Yakking. Anybody know? I can rhyme and sound like a drone. I just got a big red chummy there on my window. You lost your signal, mister. Better stop and collect your thoughts for 2 seconds. Let's go back to the video. That's more fun. Hang on, I'll bring up my other window just so I can keep an eye. I was on a good roll that time. It booted me off, but I know Google holds on to the signal, so just give me a second, folks. And still clicking away, 27. I better get my button gear. I gotta let the cover. I got 3 thumbs down so far, so I better get busy. I'm expecting more. Let me keep going. This was the only long one.
Per second in a certain volume or mass of material. Now
that stuff is all running out onto the plant, and every time it rains, it's washing more isotopes from all the broken pieces that were blown all over the site. And think of these as neutrons and X-rays popping out, creating these wild isotopes from this MOX fuel alone, not counting the other 2 reactors that detonated and sprayed hundreds of tons all over that site. And so that way, as the water got in that site, those rods and those pellets and everything fell down into the earth where they're still at. And so it's hell on earth, that site. Remember at Chernobyl, which was much tinier than this by all comparisons, the people that went to work on it were only allowed, the soldiers, 600,000 soldiers got medals. And in Fukushima, and they only went out on the roof for 15 or 20 seconds originally as they grabbed a piece, threw it over the roof and went home. Never went back on a nuclear waste site again. In Fukushima, they take the homeless off the streets. We should dress Jay up as a homeless guy and put him down on the streets and we'll cut his tongue off. Just joking. We'll sew it to his lip. And we'll show him there like he sounds like a dummy. And I bet you they'll grab him, bring him in there. He'll get his rads. He'll watch everybody else as their organs are melting that they're dragging in there. The homeless, the victims. Jay hasn't got the balls to go down there and kick a tin can around. I can guarantee you. The things that he's doing, and the same with Ken Buesseler, what they're doing is the lowest form of human on the planet. You do not get any lower than that, where they try to manipulate, and marginalize the facts to a point where there's, the line is so blurred because they have an education, and so they can equate insignificant stuff and try to imply that that's what it actually means. I'm showing you here now.
Those numbers are very large, and to put them in
she asked me about water going on there. He wants to talk about
Beckles. Towards the sort of
simple question she asked
release of these radioactive elements that occurred during atmospheric testing in the 20th century. So, for example, with respect to cesium-137, which is one of the elements that was released in very large quantities from Fukushima.
It's made. The reactors are made of uranium and plutonium. Jay, say it. Plutonium. 239, 240, 238, 241. This is weaponized. This was milled from nuclear weapons. It was already weaponized and through the chain reaction, which makes it a couple of million times even worse again. But this was milled from the missiles. This was milled, Jay. Ken, yeah, creatures, yeah, crazy critters.
The amount that was actually released to the ocean is on the order of 950 petabecquerels.
Yeah, that was for cesium-137, but there was 30 times more strontium. You don't mention that number. How come? You don't talk about the uranium-234 and the 235. How come? Reactors don't run on cesium, shithead. You dummy. You mortal idiot. You stupid dummy. You're supposed to represent Canada and you're up there talking about that shit? Why don't you tell people what the real shit is? How hard could that be? It's your big shot education, with all the jobs you had, the fact that you worked at Woods Hole, and you're pretending that you're independent from a university, and that Ken is independent from Woods Hole when you both work for the same spot. It's despicable, man.
An order of magnitude sort of difference. So those are the sorts of numbers that I've had access to.
He does that the whole way through the video, right?
And Ken,
it's annoying as all
what
fuck.
Do the numbers tell you? Some reports say 300 tons, some
he's
say 800
do the same thing.
tons.
Well,
right? 300 tons, 800 tons coming out of the plant. That's what she said. Coming out of the plant in water, underneath the plant on the bedrock, sweeping out all these isotopes, running over the hot coriums, extraordinarily toxic, unimaginable.
Tons isn't really the relevant number, as Jay tried to get us thinking.
Of course it is.
Becquerels, the radioactivity.
From all these X-rays and neutrons from the broken pieces is picking up all those isotopes.
You can have a lot of water, but it's not contaminated to a high degree. It's just a lot of water.
Like you say, you take a bat and it'll tear the skin right off you. If you had a piece here this big, I couldn't finish the sentence. If you had a piece the size of a banana, I couldn't finish the sentence. Ken? I'm talking to you, Ken, you freaking creature. Your days are numbered for being a public speaker. Because we're going to end up having to shame all of ye, or we're going to have to be like Ukraine, where we get the fire hoses out and we take it all back.
Some of those wells and those tanks are highly contaminated, so it depends upon the ice.
The tanks are highly contaminated. Which is true. But that's the exact same stuff that went out into the ocean. Right? Except the stuff that went out in the ocean ran over the hot coriums on the way down. He couldn't pump that out because it ran over the coriums. It was running over all the pieces of the rod all over the site for the next 1,000 years. It's supposed to be in a sarcophagus till the end of time. You can't even build it. But for the last 70 years, you claimed you could. Your license says you're not supposed to do stuff like that. And you put all of these rods over the nuclear power plant itself in Japan, where there's a fault line with 1,000 to 5,000 earthquakes a year.
Isotope we're talking about, and what Jay was talking about, what we've seen from data from the Japanese, from the kind of
data from the Japanese.
From the
TEPCO's lied every day, man. Everybody knows that, right?
We're out into the ocean. Our numbers for cesium that are much, 1,000 times less, 10,000 times less than what's going on in
There was enough release just in the first day. A gram of it, of cesium, for instance, which the reactors don't run on. They run on uranium, plutonium. That you won't even hear them mention uranium. You'll mention uranium, natural uranium in the ocean. You can take a bath in that every day. Every friggin' day. It'll never give you cancer. But if you were to take a piece of uranium the size of this here and drop it in a bathtub and sit in there, you wouldn't get out of it. And you have to put your body on a nuclear waste site. But he always does that, where he equates that around.
2011.
Hi, sweet Jane.
Not to say it's zero. We were actually one of the first groups to say in 2011 that there's still a leak there. We should be concerned.
You were not, man. Everybody was screaming, how much is it leaking? Right? And so this is where they try to give themselves some credibilities. That was 4. Let's jump over. And I forgot to put a 5, so this one's called 6. I got no idea. Claims tanks are the scary. Oh, yeah, right.
And so it actually surprised me this summer when they said it's not leaking to the ocean, and they said, well, it's not getting out of the harbor. Well, anyone offshore can detect those isotopes. It is leaking continuously at low levels of cesium compared to the...
At low levels of cesium. He's talking about the tanks, right? So it's a total distraction. It's hemorrhaging out onto the plant 100 feet down on the bedrock, non-stop. You can't do nothing with it. There is no... We got 3 chain reactions going on there. There's no little black book on this stuff. We've never had this. It's headed down to Argentina. And the isotopes and the radiation that's creating because of the river underneath it. All this stuff is all over the site because the detonations were felt 25 miles away by AP reporters to concussions. It blew hundreds of tons of radioactive material, extraordinarily unbelievable radioactive because it went through the chain reaction. It was already in spent pool all over that site. So the site has to stay perpetually wet.
Release, nothing like the 100 of or 50 to 80 petabecquerels in 2011.
He's talking about cesium. What about 50 petabecquerels in 2011 of uranium? What about the 50, of plutonium? And what about 50 petabecquerels of iodine-129? Ken?
But there's
just
other
talking about
stories
cesium.
Too. There's other isotopes. Strontium-90 is one that actually is in those tanks.
So now the tanks are a concern. Oh, Jesus, we better be careful because the tanks might tip over. There's strontium-90, you'll get out. Say what the game is?
Something that in the future could be of concern. In other words, we had an accident.
So in the future could be a concern. So that was a good way of getting everybody distracted away from the actual 3 melted cores and the constant hemorrhaging. So let's keep going.
So we start to be concerned about cesium because it has a 30-year half-life for the 137 isotope.
I'll have to go find the other cesiums that got a couple of million-year isotope half-lives that are, that's the way this stuff works. And you can get cesium-137 from stardust, and you can get cesium-137 from a beach that's indigenous. It's got nothing to do with this conversation, but they put a name like that on it in order to confuse people and manipulate people. And everything we talk about here got nothing to do with background radiation. It's all about nuclear radiation. Background radiation has no meaning in this conversation. You won't find E equals MC squared where he says throw in a banana, throw in some potatoes, go out and take some walk, scrape off your skin, take that background radiation, and then make yourself a little bomb.
At that site, they're actually actively removing the cesium from these hundreds of tons of water a day.
Hey, that's great. Now we can just clean up all the nuclear sites on the planet because they're actively removing all the cesium-137 out of the water, which is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. If they're able to do that, do you think there'd be 450 billion gallons down there at Hanford? Do you think they would leave that 41 miles of open pit at Hanford if they can wig out some of that stuff? You want to go down and try it? You're welcome to, Ken. You crazy, crazy critter. Crazy nuclear critter. I'd see you go down and work it out, kid. I'd see you go down to Japan, down into Fukushima, with your little video camera, and visit the kids down there where they decontaminated the playground. There's still 1 million becquerels per square meter, Ken. And sit there and get some anal cancer. You're just a disgusting person, boy.
Remain radioactively contaminated waters.
Disgusting maggot.
Quite high enough that if even 10 of those tanks were to leak, and we saw one of them leak this summer.
If 10 of those tanks were to leak, what, Ken? What, Ken? Is the whole world going to be in trouble, Ken? Do you got any idea what friggin' happened? Do you, should we all, like, write letters to Ken and say, Ken, I know this is going to come as a friggin' shock, but the place is carnage. There was 3 detonations that blew hundreds of tons of rods all over the fucking site. You moron. I'm sorry. You fucking dummy. Tell everybody that as a distraction, the only concern you got is if there's something that happens to them tanks. Like, it's sickening.
That equals the whole amount that was released 2.5 to 3 years ago.
Of strontium-90. Now, see, all the cesium that got released, there was 30 times more strontium-90. Right? And so this is the bait and switch that these guys do.
So we have other isotopes that may become
They're scum.
concern. So it is an evolving
accident,
and near Japan and right at the coast of Japan, it's severe enough that they've had to close fisheries. And
we're talking about here, not there's dummy.
But again, the further away you get, you asked earlier about the behavior.
Well, it's dangerous there, but it's not dangerous anywhere else.
The ocean is...
Yeah, when you get out, like he said in the video I made for you today, where he says, when you get out 1,000 miles, like potassium-40. Right? How do you get from cesium-137 to potassium-40? Right? The biggest fable ever made. It's totally careless. This guy should never have his degree. If we had actual institutions out there were paying attention, that guy should lose his degree immediately. Woods Hole should drop him on his head. And the University of Victoria should do the same with Jay. They're liabilities. They're humiliating Canada, and now they're going to humiliate the university. And Woods Hole. They're trying to kill Woods Hole, I think. It's one or the other.
Naturally it dissolves and moves with the water, and as it moves...
It does not naturally dissolve, Ken. Cesium-137 doesn't man-made, I'm yelling now, radioactive isotopes don't dissolve. They don't just fucking dissolve. That would be the solution if that's what they done. Everybody would be out there, we'll just dissolve them. This is something you're inventing.
Moves the concentration
fucking heart attack.
So we can sample safely off of...
What about the uranium? That dissolved too? The plutonium dissolved too? The 30 times more strontium-90, that all dissolves, according to Ken. You know what dissolve means? It kills all the phytoplankton in the ocean over a couple of billion years of putting out energy, then it dissolves. It's okay, Zoe.
Fukushima right now in the ocean, and it would be even lower levels here on our coast.
Yeah, it's high levels by Japan, but it'd be even lower levels over on our coast. Like, poof! That's all you can do with someone like that is haul off and smack it right in the mouth. The open palm. How else could you even look at someone like that as anything less than the scum of the earth? This is the people... We're supposed to be able to turn to this guy for information. And this is his cliche. There's a lot over there, but there's probably less over here. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. There can't be anybody any stupider. Right? But this is what they're feeding out there. They're not stupid. They're extraordinarily educated. They're doing it on purpose. They're manipulating you on purpose. They're deceiving everybody on purpose.
Again, safe is a bit of a loaded word.
There's
I'll risk with everything we do, but certainly much less risk on our side of the ocean than near those reactors.
So it does...
Well, Jesus, Ken, you're brilliant. We ought to give you the Pulitzer Prize there. There's a lot more radiation over there than there is here. Like, is he trying to be a comedian? Or am I missing something here? Because he's actually using that in the context as, don't worry, folks, it's okay over here. There's more over there, so there's less over here, so don't worry. Because there's a lot over there, but there's not as much here. But it's just...
dissolves as it travels this way.
It's outright lie, though.
It gets into the ocean, or
it dissolves
atmospherically, becomes quickly dissolved.
As it comes out of the atmosphere, quickly dissolves. It's radioactive fallout. It's known as nuclear fallout. It's known as dust. It doesn't dissolve. It doesn't stop putting out energy for the life of the isotope. If it's uranium, it's 4.5 billion years before it changes to its next radioactive isotope. If it's any of the isotopes, that's what it does. But the reactors are made of uranium, plutonium. And their byproducts, are many, so many. And you got the iodine-129. Every 3 iodine-131, there's an iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. And there's a lot of these extraordinary half-lives that we're going to end up having.
And that means that, think of dye when you drop something, it starts to decrease in concentration. It's a streaky process.
Yes. It doesn't decrease. It decreases in concentration, but that doesn't lose any power. So as that goes out into the phytoplankton and all the other creatures, it's destroying more. It never stops beating. It's beating out all this energy. A Becquerel is enough energy to flip over a grain of sand in the nuclear terminology, but not in the indigenous background mythologies.
It's following ocean currents. The Kuroshio is the main one that moves quickly into the ocean, and so that's why it's taken 2+ years to get across, but that's a big distance.
But that's a big distance. Well, isn't that big? You got across in a couple of years. Number 8. Now, these are lobbyists, what we're listening to. These are 100% lobbyists, but they're the devil's lobbyists. Right? Their job is to stop you from working out what I'm telling you, to make you never understand the things I'm saying, to deceive you of even the concept that this exists. That's their whole job, and they go out looking for the most vulnerable.
And Jay, what are your thoughts on fish?
Some of the most relevant measurements, I think, come from an article that was published by Nick Fisher, in which Ken was a co-author, and talking about Pacific bluefin.
Right, so now he's gone back to Ken's site. Oh, she asked him a question. Well, there was a good article over there on Ken's site. Get your ass on over there. Where we'll just take your money, slap you up the side of the head. I'll get to that.
Now, the concentrations of Fukushima-derived radionuclides, and the focus there was largely on the cesium isotopes, suggested that there is additional exposure to radiation to human consumers. And those eating typical North American diets could expect exposures to increase, but that on the order of 500-fold more exposure to radiation from human consumers of bluefin tuna would be coming from the naturally occurring radionuclide polonium-210.
Polonium-210. Now that's much lower than any background radiation of bananas or potatoes. And so he's equating that with an increase. So is there an increase of this stuff? Now, because you got to realize that the people that he's listening to him, this is the first time they heard the words plutonium, but he says polonium, right? Which is it's in the same categories, but it's not, of course, because they sound alike. But we know that the reactors are made of weaponized military nuclear weapons that were milled down. They took the plutonium and milled it down even more. And so he puts out that word, and so when people looks it up, they say, oh, that's not very bad. It's less than background radiation of a banana, which, don't get me started. But the plutonium-238, 239, 240, and 241 is what's coming out of it. And that's what he should be talking about, not the polonium, but the plutonium. Right? See how easy it is to get confused on that? And by doing that, people don't understand that this got 24,000-year hardcore, I'll kill your ass now life. And extraordinarily toxic to the ocean. And the isotopes will destroy hundreds of millions of phytoplankton every minute. It just floats around destroying phytoplanktons at hundreds of millions a minute forever and ever, for 24,000 years in the ocean. And he specializes in that stuff, so he knows this is what it does to the ocean. He knows those snowfalls that were sustained for months from radioactive fallout of uranium, plutonium, the strontium, and the cesiums, that even if it did fall down towards the ocean floor, it got brought back up with the cold water that normally came up with nutrients to feed the phytoplankton at the surface, which is the very chain of life of this planet. Not only because it produces 50% of the oxygen on the planet, but because it's the food chain itself for the ocean. The very beginning of it. You attack that, you kill everything else. Nothing can survive it. But as those plumes, because it's hemorrhaging so much that 2 of them skipped over so effectively, but those big plumes from all those isotopes getting washed out all through Japan. Every time it rains and every time it snows, it all gets washed out into the ocean again. It gets liberated. Isotopes are being picked up in weather and brought out. The ocean is radioactive on a large scale, unimaginable scale because of Fukushima. That's not going to stop anytime soon. That's burning away in a chain reaction that we've never seen, unhinged, at a site where it's so toxic that a Dixie cup of it will kill everything on the planet. It'll kill everything in a restaurant in an hour. 200 people. Every hour, non-stop, for billions of years. But the stuff he's trying to equate it with has got nothing to do with this, see?
That's been in the ocean since there's been an ocean, more or less.
So polonium doesn't have nothing to do, because it's just indigenous. You can take a bath in that every day, but you take a bath in plutonium, 239, 240, 241, etc., it'll kill you. You don't get out of it. You know, these concentrations of 7,000 becquerels in your drinking water, that should never ever be said by somebody talking about nuclear stuff, because it's irrelevant. You drink 7,000 becquerels, you off-gas 7,000 becquerels that are insignificant, that are part of your DNA, literally. Everything on this planet is acclimated to that. And
so I think, again, it's about putting the risk in perspective. Personally, there are a lot of other reasons not to eat bluefin tuna that I would put closer to the top of my list rather than Fukushima radionuclides. That fishery isn't doing very well, for example.
So the fishery's not doing good, so it's okay to eat it. It's okay to eat poison because you might... well, why don't we get rid of GMO, Jay, you creature? GMO got no nutrition in it. They engineered it all out. 85 cents of the corner shops, or 100% of the corner shops, and 85% of the supermarkets are genetically modified foods. They engineered glyphosates and formaldehydes into it, which are carcinogens and toxic, stop you from uptaking nutrients. Not that it matters, because they engineered it all out. So if you happen to eat some organic, you won't even be able to uptake that. They couldn't engineer nutrition into the food. The only way you could do it was engineer it all out, all the potassium, all the magnesium, all the calcium, all the iron, all the cobalt. I think you're a fucking scumbag. I really do. I think you're the lowest form of life. It's unimaginable someone like you works at the University of British Columbia as a professor. It's the most unimaginable, unethical thing imaginable. You lied. I can't imagine how many lies you're after telling. But you're so smooth at this tonight, it's incredible that you're willing to go out and stab everybody in the back. Even your own family, even your own brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, even your own children, even your own spouse. You're willing to go out and lie to them, I'm sure. Because you wouldn't want to tell them what you're doing. You don't want to tell them how much of a liar, manipulator, and an actual deceitful fucker you really truly are. Because by what you're doing here tonight, that proves you're a monster. You're a psychological, pathological fucking liar. There's zero good about you. I can't find one thing in that entire interview where you told the truth. You're a pathological, maniacal fucking liar. A very dangerous one. Now this is even scarier because of the Woods Hole, what we're learning here tonight.
Ken, I know you have to leave us in about 5 minutes. Why don't you talk a little bit about the analyzing that you've been doing at the Fukushima plant since 2011?
Well, all of our work to date has been funded by private foundations, like we said. We're not supported by the government to go over to Japan and sample.
Plutonium water boards.
But with this concern on the U.S. West Coast, Canadian coast line, we've started a crowd-funded campaign, ourradioactiveocean.org.
So he wants people to send them, and Mama Knox put a comment on the last video. By the way, Mama Knox, that was marked spam. I had to unspam it. And they want a crowdsource where you send them stuff and they pay you, or you pay them and they tell you, but they don't tell everybody else. That's literally what's going on. But also that you can't trust him, right? You're going to send them samples that are high rated and they're going to send you back the information. No. They're just going to make a whole bunch of money for doing nothing. They're not even going to check it. They're just going to sit there and mark down numbers. They're not even going to fucking try. You can hear them laughing anyway. Yeah, you can send it to my lab like you couldn't even contain yourself.
And the thought was, we have samples from individuals who keep asking us, can we make some analyses for the cesium isotope?
Because we're supposed to trust
others,
you.
I'm sure, want to know what levels are near their beaches, near their waters. And so we've opened up.
And so people that put their faith in him now, he's going to stab them to death.
Site just 2 days ago, where people can propose new locations to sample, participate in reaching fundraising goals, and then
money.
Send them a kit to collect.
You know, if I was ever going to go asking for money, you fucking know I asked you for money because you'd be laughing for a full hour. Because you have no idea how low I would stoop. You have no idea what I would do. But I don't. These guys don't stop. I would be out there doing something cool. Saying, hey, we're going to do something freaking cool here. These guys, hey, you know, you send me the money. Send us the stuff, we'll check it. We'll get back to you. But all they do is lie in their interviews. Every friggin' one of them, non-stop. It's
the water in return to us, and we would then process these and put those data online. It's not a simple process. It's relatively easy to collect, but it takes 5 gallons of water, quite a big volume, to measure the levels that are there already, and what we're trying.
Yeah, they had 40 million becquerels. Remember that? I would like to see them measure that one. 40 million becquerels of iodine-131. 10 million becquerels of those were iodine-129, 50 million year half-life in California. You don't need no fucking 5-gallon bucket of that shit, I can assure you. Fuck you up.
You see it is the addition of the 134 cesium, the abundant isotope from Fukushima.
The abundant isotope from Fukushima. From the nuclear reaction. Say it, Ken, you dummy.
It has a 2-year half-life, so it's only around from a more recent source. It's a fingerprint in a way to say, is that water at all showing signs of the arrival of the plume from isotopes?
But you gotta send me your money and send me your buckets of shit for me to check. And it's over 2 years has gone by, so why is he even talking about that? You know what I'm saying? Uranium's got a half-life of 4.5 billion years. Plutonium's got a half-life of 24,000 years. Why not look for that stuff? Why not look for the iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life? Why not look for those isotopes? They can't travel one without the other, so why not look for the sure shot? If you truly want to do what you're going to do for the nuclear, man-made, radioactive isotopes, not the indigenous. Okay, here we go. And he got his own lab. Now this is fun. He took your plutonium for a walk and got off the leash. Whenever.
We have a listener who wrote an email. Is it safe to eat seafood as a tourist in Japan?
Actually, that's a very good question, because I think what people don't realize, it's sort of like I think of oyster beds here. Some areas are safe and some aren't.
No, it's not like an oyster bed where some beds are safe and some is not. You retarded monkey. Ken? You're talking about red tide come in and you can't take the oysters for a little while because they're bivalves, and so they go in and out through the same hole, right? Or holes, and so they get contaminated. Well, we're talking about radiation. You don't get rid of it. So you can't equate that with red tide that everybody's familiar with, would show up for a month, a year or something like that, and then you're not allowed to pick seafood out of those areas with shellfish anyway because of the red tide, because it's toxic to humans. We're talking about radiation. You can't equate it that way. If radiation goes and settles there, it's bad till the end of time. With red tide, it's okay 2 weeks later. But that's what I mean about Ken, right? He just uses stuff like that endlessly. It's unbelievable how much he used like that.
Tens of thousands of measurements in seafood as it's brought to shore. They've closed the areas where they exceed the threshold in Japan for commercial fishing. And so those fish simply don't get to market when they exceed the level. And their level is very stringent. It's actually more stringent than ours for the radionuclides of cesium in seafood.
What about the uranium? How stringent is that one? How about the plutonium? How stringent is that one? You know what? I can't even take it tonight. I got to have a cigarette. Second time in 90 days, or not even 90 days, 85, 86 days. If you wonder what I'm smoking Player's True Plain. And that's got no chemicals. And it's got no filters. And filters makes the particles smaller. And most cigarettes got 4,000 chemicals in it because the EPA grandfathered in 65,000 chemicals. So you can legally use those 4,000 chemicals, right? Nobody knows why they do that. Probably got nothing to do with all the cancer. They've been trying for 40 years, academic studies, to prove nicotine gives you cancer. I go after the 4,000 trace chemicals they're putting in there. Jay probably knows a lot about that. Ken probably knows a lot about that stuff. They got shares in their company. Wherever the company is out there selling those 4,000 chemicals to the cigarette companies. Well, these don't have chemicals. These are natural tobacco, apparently. And they got no filters. So the filters will make the particles so small they get through the liners of your lungs, where they do some serious damage. But I've been at this all day. 6 o'clock this morning, right up, I had like 20 minutes before I came on here. I finally cut all of these pieces. And I stopped, had a cup of tea, and then I sat here in front of the camera, and I've been streaming since.
So we're not getting those seafood in our markets, and when I go to Japan, I eat the seafood because I know they've
So when he goes to Japan, he eats the seafood. Unbelievable, obvious.
Tested. What's getting on the market is safe to eat in Japan.
So he eats the food in Japan because he thinks it's safe to eat. Well, you can't find uranium in your fucking seafood, Ken, you dummy. You can't find uranium or plutonium in your seafood. Particularly Japanese. Try catching an octopus before you eat them. They eat them live down there, right? They're crazy. They're a disgusting society anyway. They got vending machines down there where they sell little girls' used panties. Ken's probably a big favor of that one, I bet you. He's twisted.
Well, what about other kinds of food? I recently bought some nori rolls from Japan. They were organic, and there was a huge sticker on the package
that
said radiation tested, radiation
I can't smoke
free.
Much.
Well, my
you hear that
understanding, and I've seen some of the equipment, is
What's
that
this?
Everything coming out of the regions close by, Fukushima in particular, the prefecture, their state-type system, is tested, all of the food supplies. So this is rice, this is nori, this is the seafood. And so they're going one by one. Every bag of rice is going through some quite elaborate, expensive testing going on.
So every bag of rice is going through the lab. Every single one. Like he told so many lies, right? He just can't help himself at this stage. Oh, that's too good. It's been a rough day. I don't smoke much, though. There's no nicotine. That's going to hurt you. It's all about the 4,000 chemicals in the cigarette and the filter in the end of it.
To determine what the levels are in those. And again, if they exceed that, they have a protocol to shut down that particular source. So,
when I go talk to the farmer with all the cows, or the farmers down there where the pigs are going in and kicking open their doors and eating all their salt and sugar. The wild pigs, domesticated ones. Hang on, one more.
So today we are talking about what the science and the facts actually tell us. Dr. J.T. Cullen is Associate Professor in the School of Earth and Ocean Sciences at the University of Victoria in BC, Canada, and Ken Buesseler is a Senior Scientist in Marine Chemistry and Geochemistry at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And they've got a website, ourradioactiveocean.org, which is asking citizens to get involved to help them fund testing because it's not being done at this.
So these clowns are going to go testing. These people are actually going to go testing. You tell them cats alive. So these clowns ain't going to go testing. Are going to go testing. Would you trust these people after what you learned tonight? Could you trust these people if they're on your same street? I couldn't. Or if they're in my community, I still couldn't trust them. These are murderers. I mean, what they're doing here tonight, they're murdering. That's an hour and 3 minutes. Okay, I'll find one more clip. I'll find a short one, and then we'll call it a night. I didn't realize we were this far down the road. Yes. Let me see. Oh, my favorite one here. This is just like a 30-second clip before we call it a night. I didn't realize it's just late into the show, folks. Here we go. This one is 53 seconds.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to point out is that the radioactive isotopes that have been discovered at that site are radioisotopes that come from naturally occurring radioactive minerals.
How the fuck would you know that, Jay? How could you possibly come out and say that. They don't even friggin' know. They try to blame it on utensils. Listen, that's there on the beach because the rain washes it out of the community. That whole community, California, got hammered. All the plumes, all the models. Anybody's not familiar with this, go look at my short Thunderfoot video I put out a couple of days ago. I used all the models in that. Or the one yesterday, or the day, rather, that I put out about these guys. I put lots of models in that. Go over to E&E News. Their site is full of it. And type in models, or type in study, or type in report, or type in plume. And then go through those lists and educate yourself. And you'll realize that if you're related to Ken or you're related to Jay, the moral and ethical thing to do is check them into a mental institution, get a drip in their arm, don't ever let them the fuck out of there again. That's the moral and ethical thing to do. And, too bad we don't allow good old whippings here in Canada or hangings in this country anymore, because if there's ever two people that deserve to be prosecuted and publicly flogged and then hung, it's these two creatures that are manipulating the most vulnerable of society by getting out into the media on purpose and spreading as much disinformation. I had at least another 9 clips there to go through tonight. I can't get through, but that's an incredible, the link is below, the entire video is 100% lies and manipulations and misrepresentations. And this is shocking that these people are put up on a pedestal when they're the most harmful, most vicious things you can imagine. The most untrustworthy words can never come out of a mouth as much as they did out of theirs. And the fact that Jay Cullen is a professor at a university in British Columbia is a black eye on all of Canada. 100%. The students that are there need to be rescued and put through re-education, because everything he taught them has hurt them for the rest of their lives. Everything he touches hurts those things for the rest of their lives. There's nothing good that'll come out of his mouth ever. Particularly in that interview, he's very comfortable with lying and manipulating, deceiving. It's really heartbreaking to see this kind of opposition. This is what they got to resort to. And so we're an hour and 7 minutes. That's too long. I'll have to come in after and read everybody's comments. I seen the comments going there earlier, folks. You folks are unbelievably cool. We'll be back tomorrow night, back on schedule. And that's the best we can do, hour and 7 minutes. I'm not going to hold you any longer. Have a nice night, folks. We'll kick their asses again tomorrow night. We'll probably even finish this one off. Take care.